Thank you so much for joining us for our session today, getting started with Google Gemini for education. We have several presenters with us today, and I will let everyone introduce themselves. So we'll start with Mariana Bernstein.
Hi, good to see everyone. Mariana Bernstein, Associate Director for Instructional Technology and Media. Um, Happy to be here.
Thanks, Mariana. I'm next, Marta Kordkowska, Director of Educational Technology and Strategy, part of our EdTech team, and happy to be here with you for this class. And I'll turn it to Carrie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Levinson. I am the manager of reference and instruction services at the Levy Library, and I too am happy to be here. And I'll hand it over to Eric.
Thank you. So I'm Eric Poppel. I'm the senior instructional designer here. And yeah, what a great turnout. This is great.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. We ask as a couple of housekeeping notes that you add your questions to the chat or save them to the end. We are more than happy to answer them. We will answer them in the order that they're received if we can, depending on who is presenting at that time. And otherwise, we will answer them at the end, or should there be something we can't answer, we are happy to answer it via email and follow up with you after the fact. In today's session, we are going to address several learning objectives. We're going to describe what Google Gemini is and its core capabilities. We'll also apply it to some educational use cases, summarization, explanation, clinical reasoning, and we'll identify responsible and ethical uses of AI in academia and medicine. So we'll touch on a lot of these topics. Note that this is a 45 minute to an hour course, so we can't deep dive into each of these sections, but we can certainly start the conversation. Before we get started with the core content for today, I do want to point you to some resources for AI at Mount Sinai. We have the Artificial Intelligence Library Guide that houses really a lot of resources. If you go to that library guide, you will find um, anything from current events to some publications to current literature on AI, so a little bit of everything. You'll also find our YouTube channel that houses these webinars and others on the topic of AI, and it's constantly expanding, and also the AI use policy, among other things. So we will share that link in the chat, and we do look forward to exploring that with you. The other thing I wanted to point your attention to is an AI policy. The AI policy is for the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and it focuses on the use of artificial intelligence in teaching, learning, and discovery. It is a guideline. It does not supersede other policies. You might have more departmental policies, but wanted to share the things, excuse me, also that to think about as you are thinking about AI use. So now, diving into Google Gemini and what is Google Gemini? Google Gemini is a large language model, much like many of the large language models that you may have heard of before. It is a multimodal model. It's trained on things like audio, text, and visual content. So it's not just focusing on text or conversation, but rather a broader context. It allows for long content and multi-step problems. So in comparison with other LLMs, you'll notice that Gemini can handle slightly longer content and might be better at some multi-step problems than other LLMs. There's also two key areas that Google Gemini as a large language model differs from other large language models, and that's this mixture of experts. So rather than activating the entire model or the entire network of what it's been trained on, it focuses on the topic that you're asking, so that it uses only the relevant areas or experts for each of those queries. Moving on to efficiency. The way that it's been created allows for massive scale and capability while maintaining faster response times. So, just the way it's designed on the back end allows us to be able to see larger amounts of information or process larger amounts of information. On the right, on this slide, you'll see Gemini versus traditional large language models and some of the features. And we will dive into a lot of these. But um, basically, Google Gemini has been trained multimodal as a multimodal model from the beginning, rather than like having different portions added as the models evolve. And you can process larger amounts of information, and Mariana will talk to you about that a little bit more. Um, up to 2 million tokens, though once you get real high up there, it might slow down. And it's integrated into Google Workspace and Cloud, and we'll show you a little bit of that. And then it focuses on this idea of mixture of experts for speed, so that, if you're looking at an education topic, those are the portions of the model that are activated. If we have any neuroscientists in the room, very much like neural networks activated for language processing, right? So, Eric.
So today we will be discussing, how to utilize Gemini more in depth, but right now I want to talk about the core functionalities that Gemini has. Starting with input, right? It's what we're placing into Gemini, which are files directly from your computer or from your Google Drive, since Gemini actually integrates with Google and its products. You can also verbally speak into your microphone as an input for Gemini. Then there's interaction, right? That's the back and forth response between us, the user, and Gemini. This includes a natural language chat similar to ChatGPT and a guided learning tool. And finally, there's output, which is the unique content that Gemini produces for you that you can access. This includes deep research, which we'll talk about more too about. It can generate quizzes, flashcards, and infographics, images, the Canvas tool, and I'll go over these in more detail in the upcoming slides. Now, logistics of access, right? So all active mssm.edu Google Workspace for Education accounts now have access to Google Gemini 2.5. I want you to focus on two keywords here, education. So your account must be educational, and usually that ties directly to your email address, mssm.edu. So if you have a mountsinai.org, you might not have access to Gemini, but also, you may or may not, because a lot of faculty have dual roles here. Once you do have access, though, you can try directly going to gemini.google.com. Alternatively, you can download the Gemini app to your mobile device and sign in with your MSSM credentials there. Last but not least, you can visit g.mssm.edu. So this is actually where your Google suite of products hosted by Mount Sinai is. You can sign in with your MSSM account there and then select Gemini from the applications menu in the top right corner of the screen. If you need any technical support, Ask It team is here in the Annenberg building, 1139. They're there Mondays through Fridays, 8 to 6 p.m. You can also email them at askit@mssm.edu or call the Digital and Technology Partners, DTP, service desk at 212-241-4357. They're available 24/7. Now, I'm going to walk through the interface. This is Gemini. You may find this familiar because the design of it is very similar to ChatGPT. We're going to start with the leftmost tool, which is that plus sign, which opens up the upload file menu, which, you can upload PDFs, Word documents. You can even upload Google Docs, audio, video, and it allows Gemini to analyze vast amounts of text in addition to the prompt you're inputting. To the right of that is the tools menu. So bringing that open, you'll see the guided learning tool, which allows Gemini to essentially become your study partner. The deep research tool, which allows Gemini to generate a report based on vast amounts of information on the web. And then once you get that data Actually, this report takes a little longer than the other ones. You can then turn that into flashcards, quizzes, and infographics using that tool. Then there's create images. These are really great based on your prompt. Gemini does a really good job creating images from scratch. But please be mindful that access to the image creation tool is limited and your account might have it disabled. Then there's the Canvas tool. So Canvas is very similar if you're used to like Google Docs. This is a space for you to collaborate with others, whether you're working on creating like documents, coding, grammar, things of that nature. You can do that together. Moving on to the right where it says fast, this opens up an area where you can select which model you want to use. The fast one is generally the one you're probably going to use for most of your prompts, and it's the standard one I would actually just recommend to use. But if for some reason it's not getting you, what you're looking for, you can always click on Thinking with 3 Pro. They actually just changed the naming of that. It used to be called something else, but it lets you do prompts for more complex topics, including like math, coding, and reasoning. And this also takes a little bit longer for it to do the search. And last but not least, it has the voice input, that little microphone tool, so you can vocalize your prompts rather than typing them out.
So we'll take a moment to explore these features live. You should be seeing my Google Gemini screen. Okay, so just like Eric showed you on that last slide, it keeps information over on the left-hand side for what your chats might be. It then also you can have your content right in the middle. So you would have a chat conversation here. One example is a slide deck generation. So if you were looking for an education use case, right, and you wanted a basic slide, it could do that for you. So if I say, Gemini, please create a slide for my class on aphasia, or maybe I'll say slide deck of 5 slides for my class on aphasia. I would like the information to be at a novice learner level with types of aphasia and some definitions. I would hit submit. And so this is going to take a little bit longer, and you see it loading over here. And so what it'll do is it'll start by generating an outline, and then it'll give you one of 2 things. It'll give you a HTML code, and it will also possibly give you images or diagrams, and it will actually generate the Google Slides for you. This is a little different from some of the other large language models, and I find that it has been especially helpful for education cases. I go between several of the large language models, and this has been most helpful to me. Notice that I'm using the general prompt. I'm not using the more advanced version that I have access to, that 3 Pro, but rather the most basic. You'll also see that it is telling you what it's doing as it's doing it. And again, you are the human in the loop, right? So it will formulate this. Again, it takes some time, but it will also it's a basic, right? It's the first step, and you're going to need to go back and refine that content. You'll see that as it's generating, we also have an export to slides option. So it fully integrates with my Google account or a download option. It does tell you that it's going to take some time to make that happen. The other thing that if I ask it to, and I'm not going to do it right in this moment, just on sheer time, but if I ask it to make edits, it will provide me HTML. So again, I probably wouldn't want an introduction for novice learners. Would want that for myself. I could flip through some of those slides, and some of those images. I can decide what I want to keep, what I don't. If I export to slides, I can edit it in real time. It has generated some definitions. Being an expert on this, I can actually go through and verify myself, but you might have to go in and verify that content, of course, especially when it comes to images. Um, and but the slides are very dynamic, right? They are colorful. Um, they're they're what you ask it to do essentially. But again, you're going to need to make comments. I've also asked it previously to give me sources for some of the presentations I've been doing. Um, and so it's trained to do that on my end, but you have to make sure that for yourself, you either ask it for sources or find those sources, as that might be helpful. So I didn't have just a regular conversation. I asked it to generate slides because I do think that that's what it's good at, and maybe we haven't had as much practice with it, but just one example of the uniqueness here. And so I'm going to go back to sharing my Zoom screen, and we will go from there. So now that we've showed you a brief demo, we've showed you some of the features, we also really want to spend some time talking about the integrations with Google's suite of products, because you might be using it to create something like a PowerPoint or a document or some audio, or you might be using it to do something that's a little bit more productive. So it does integrate fully with Gmail and tasks. Excuse me. So if, for example, I create a task list in Google Tasks, I can then ask Gemini to look at Google Tasks. I have to give it permission to talk to one another, and it could um, tell me what I have outstanding, tell me what to prioritize, create a summary of the things that I've already completed for the week. It integrates with Docs and Drive, just like Eric showed you, that you could just simply link it to one of those documents. Or when it comes to generating content, you could export it directly to Google Drive. It also integrates with Android and Search, your calendars and meetings. Again, you have to give it permission to talk to those spaces, Sheets and Data to analyze any type of content. And then there's also a myriad of extensions and tools within the Google suite of products that it can link directly to. So you have a lot of options for efficiency.
Thank you, Marika. So to summarize what we've talked a little bit so far, what we mentioned about Gemini, and our experience with other large language models, we wanted to talk a little bit about the key differences and similarities. So one of the most important things to understand is that these models all have like a shared core skill set, almost like a shared toolbox. So in general, no matter which one you use, Gemini or ChatGPT, you'll get excellent support with some of the essentials, right? With that we're all kind of familiar right now. So explaining hard topics in a simple and accessible way, coding, brainstorming ideas, role playing, and editing prose, and so the overlap is actually quite large. But where it gets interesting is when we have to choose the right model, and in those cases, it can actually choosing the right model can actually save us some time. So as we have already mentioned about Gemini, it's really good in working with long form, multimodal, or Google integrated tasks. If you need to summarize documents that are over 700,000 words, or as Martha mentioned before, 2 million tokens, analyze long videos, like for example, a lecture up to an hour, it can do it easily. or 11 hours of audio. You can think in your head what that might be, as well as, again, work seamlessly with Google Docs and Sheets and Slides. And Gemini is literally built for that. On the other hand, ChatGPT shines in everything that is very structured. And so, for example, step-by-step instructions. The conversations with ChatGPT are up to 128K tokens versus the 2 million that we just mentioned for Gemini. It's integrated with Copilot and API connections. And it also leads in the conversational nuance and reasoning and real-time voice mode. So the takeaway here is that both of these are really powerful tools with, I would say, slightly different superpowers. And throughout the workshop, we'll go into a little bit more details on how to recognize the right opportunities so you can choose the model that makes your work faster and easier.
And we also did a little bit of a literature review of some recent literature that looks at the differences between ChatGPT and Gemini in terms of medical and healthcare education. And largely, it's mostly they're pretty similar, but there are certain things that one may be a little bit better for. So Gemini may be better for things like patient education materials because one study found that it uh, produced uh, a reading level that was lower than ChatGPT did. But there are also some other studies that didn't find any significant differences between the language. Um, ChatGPT may be better for looking at complex tasks, such as the ones involved in clinical decision making. Both of them currently kind of struggle with visual interpretation, but Gemini is better with audio. And I will just point out that even though these are fairly recent articles, they were working with uh, previous versions of both ChatGPT and Gemini. So things are getting better all the time. And we did a pretty limited amount of articles. So these are the articles that were used in this comparison. So the takeaway here is that uh, these tools are definitely getting rigorously tested, and they're getting better at a lot of things all the time.
So now let's take a look at some more concrete examples of what both faculty and students can do with each model. Uh, because this is where the power of Gemini and ChatGPT really becomes more obvious. So we'll start with Gemini. So Gemini's strength, again, is with large, complex, and multi-model content. So for example, you can upload an entire grant document and Gemini will tell you what's missing, whether that's requires statistics or maybe outcome measures or data you need to add to strengthen your proposal. You can also, as an example, to share a grand rounds recording. And Gemini not only extracts the key point, but also gives you timestamps, and that can really help in your prep work. And the last one is actually one of my favorites. For example, a case where API can upload a lab photo or a short video that is very straightforward. And Gemini can quickly generate a set of questions for the lab students, and um, it's great for identifying errors or reinforcing some specific reasoning or content. Now, on the ChatGPT side, what are the strengths here? What are the most common scenarios where we could use ChatGPT? What is very unique to ChatGPT is creating a custom GPT, and uh, for your course, for example, or whether you're a faculty or a student, it can help you to quiz yourself or quiz your students, break down complex concepts that are specific to the course content and in that custom GPT that you just built. You can ask it to role play different, for example, patient interactions. It's essentially what it does, the custom GPT. It can play a role of a kind of personalized teaching assistant that is in your AI, that lives in AI. ChatGPT also is really great when you want to create parallel scenarios based on one incident, for example. So you give a clinical dilemma and it can instantly generate multiple versions and tailor it to different roles. And finally, ChatGPT is very strong in creating personal statements and cover letters because its tone can be naturally fluid and human-like. And that, of course, makes it a great resource for career development and advising. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the decision making and what tool is right for you at any given instance. It's really uh, about like this quick decision making. Think of this as your, I don't know, like AI triage moment. So the first question you ask yourself, what kind of material am I working with? If it's something big, long, or deeply embedded in Google Workspace, like a lengthy grant or manuscript, as we mentioned, or a video, audio, then Gemini will be your natural choice. It handles heavy content, as we mentioned, and works very efficiently. The second question is, does this task require a personal voice or creative input, or is it structured? If you are brainstorming, writing something that needs a particular tone, uh, are you creating rubrics or step-by-step guides, then ChatGPT is usually a better fit. And we also wanted to talk a little bit about the notebook LM. And the question to ask yourself there is, am I trying to learn from this content or transform it into something else? So if you need like a deep dive study guide, or if you want to create, for example, a podcast style audio, Notebook LM would be the answer here.
All right, so let's dig a little deeper and think of some specific use case examples you can utilize Gemini for within teaching and learning. Role playing with Gemini, Mariana went over really great examples. Structured output, so asking for information in specific formats. For example, create a differential diagnosis in a two-column table, or summarize the article in 5 bullet points. Even with image creation, I told it to create a step-by-step guide in the format of a comic book strip, and it did that. Time-saving applications in daily work. So in the administrative world, for example, you could draft professional emails, generate simple consent form templates that have non-PHI information in it, or create a structured agenda for a research meeting. For learning and study aids, especially for students, right? They can create personalized flashcards, generate practice quiz questions from a lecture's learning objectives, or simplifying complex concepts. Next, we have deep research for literature review, right? Accelerating literature search. You can utilize the deep research tool to synthesize findings from multiple sources on a complex clinical question or a research topic. We also have citations and verification. So Gemini will actually provide citations when using the deep research tool and often provide sources. But it also has this feature called double check to help you fact check the statements that Gemini itself is making. So you can use the generated citations for accuracy, which is essential for academic integrity, right? The last three, we have data analysis sheets. You can use Gemini in Google Sheets, for example, to generate formulas, find trends, or create charts for non-PHI, like mock research data sets. You could create educational content, generating unique conceptual images. For example, a stylized diagram of kidney loop for teaching slides using the image generation features as well. And last but not least, visualize learning. Use Gemini to analyze and explain clinical images. For example, a sample EKG tracing a diagram of a surgical procedure or a histology slide without uploading real patient data. So again, that's really important. Don't use real patient data. The focus is on teaching image interpretation.
Okay, so we spoke about prompt engineering extensively in our previous workshops, but we wanted to go over it again here since when we work with AI models, the quality of what we get back is almost always determined by the quality of what we put in. So here are a few quick reminders on how to prompt effectively and get the kind of output you actually need and you're happy with. So let's start from the first one. First is assign a role. When you tell the model who it's supposed to be, a clinician, an educator, maybe a leadership coach, the responses become more focused and more useful. Next step is define a format. How do you need the content to be presented back to you? Do you want to get back a table, maybe a bullet list, maybe a paragraph or a script or a checklist? It's important to specify, and the model will always follow the structure if you give it a structure. Next, if your task requires any reasoning or logic, enforce step-by-step thinking. How can you do that? You can use phrases like show your work or walk me through it, or actually say create a step-by-step or mention each step, mention step one step at a time. And it dramatically improves the clarity of the answer that you get. Another best practice that we wanted to recommend is if you need to upload something to the model, the rule of thumb is upload first and ask second. And whether it's a document or a table or anything or a video, you upload the material first. And as you upload the material, mention that you are uploading the material right now, but you will ask the question later. That way, the model knows to wait for your question that will come later. And with that, you'll get more precise responses. Then, how do we usually interact with the models? Usually, there are two main ways, either brainstorming or wanting to get specific answers. So if you're brainstorming, leave the context open, right? Give the model room to be creative, and you'll get broader and more generative ideas. If you need a specific answer, provide as many details as possible. Talk about all the constraints, the audience, the tone, the required length, or anything that can shape better the output. So the more details you provide, the more specific answer you're going to get, the happier you're going to be with the output. And finally, if you need citations or most up-to-date information, also specify that. So force sources and recency of the sources, and you can ask specifically, for example, provide me with sources within the past 2 years. And again, this helps the model to ground the responses and make the final output better. So these small adjustments, again, role format and reinforcing step by step, timing, constraints, all of that is what makes the difference between a general prompt to a prompt that is effective.
Okay, so we've seen that Gemini has a lot of great different uses, um, and it has a lot of different applications. But we still have to remember that copyright still exists, and we have to follow copyright laws, as well as ethical laws, ethical rules and guidance. So I'm going to just put the PDF for the AI policy for the Icahn School of Medicine into the chat. But we're going to talk a little bit about these different concerns. So Google's general terms of use and copyright policies are that you shouldn't share copyrighted content without the right to share the copyrighted content. Um, Uploading copyrighted material for personal use or learning. So if you just sort of like need a summary of things, that's okay. But you should never, as Eric also stated, you should never upload sensitive or personal information or data. And obviously, you shouldn't upload or share illegal content either. You do have to be mindful of what can and can't be uploaded to AI tools, because publishers do have restrictions. So there's a question in the chat that says, when uploading a document, what are the ethics behind copyright? And generally, you have to follow what the publisher of that article is saying, the kind of use that they allow. And you can find those on the publisher websites. Some publishers have restrictions, some don't. There are also licenses for open access publications called Creative Commons licenses that allow you to use those articles in a slightly broader way. You also have to think about the rules of the outputs. So not only what you're uploading into the tool, but also what you're getting out of it. So many journals and publishers have rules on how AI can be used in manuscripts as well. So you always have to check and make sure what those policies are, because you may not get published if you are not following those policies. So and you should also obviously always review the institutional policies, like the one I put into the chat. You should always cite whatever you are using, whether it is AI or not. That doesn't change just because you're using artificial intelligence. And you should know that the responsibility is on you. It's not on the AI tool. You are using the AI tool and you are the human here. So the responsibility falls on you to be responsible for both what you are putting into the tool and what you're getting out of it. In terms of, sorry, I'm just, we said this before, but you should never put PHI or PII into consumer grade AI tools, and you shouldn't put it in the educational version either. And HIPAA exists whether or not you're using AI, and you still need to abide by it. And this is always, it's always your judgment. So it's not meant to be a substitute for your own expertise and your own critical thinking skills. So these are general guidelines on how you can cite AI tools. So Vancouver AMA generally doesn't have a specific way, but generally they say that you can use what they have for unpublished or personal communications. So that what you see here is generally what that looks like. You want to make sure that you are citing the year, you're citing the model, and as well as the developer of the tool. And the same thing goes for APA, although APA does have a little bit more of a structure. They want you to tell them what tool you're using, where it's from, and the URL for it. And more examples are on our AI guide as well that I had that I put in the chat in the beginning. Sorry. So Yeah, like what that's great for like patient data and privacy, but what happens to your own data when you're using the tool? So it's a little bit different for the education build than for the general Google Gemini. So for the general Gemini settings, it depends on what your settings are, but your chat history may be used to improve the model. So you should keep that in mind. And that's another reason why you should never put sensitive data in there. And there may be actual human reviewers looking at the prompts and uploads. Um, for Gemini, there's a bigger privacy bubble, so the chat history is not shared outside of the institution or with others. No one is looking at what you're putting in there. And it's not used to train the model, and human reviewers are not looking at it. Um, but something to keep in mind is that for our builds, the chat history is saved on Google servers for 18 months by default. So something to know about. So in terms of vetting the content, I'll try, I know we're getting a little bit at time, but I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. You can actually use AI to validate AI in terms of prompting. So in addition to what Mariana just went over in terms of refining your prompts, you can do a whole bunch of things to make sure that the information that you're getting from Gemini is in fact valid. So you can ask for source matching and make it point out where exactly does this say this. You can compare two different versions. So the summary from the AI to the original article and ask it what might be missing from here and see what it says, as well as testing for misinterpretation. So could someone misinterpret this? And if so, how? Or because AI can be very confidently wrong in many ways, you can say, does the summary exaggerate or downplay the findings to see if it is in fact just showing you that confidence that maybe shouldn't be there. Um, and finally, you can prompt it to expand upon the summary that it first generated to use more data from the results section and see if what it's telling you is once again valid. So there's a whole bunch of things that you should appraise before you just accept that everything is great. So things that you generate, the AI generated summaries of search results, or summaries of articles or other content that you can provide in a large language model. And you should also verify things that other people have published. So if citations look weird, there may be a reason for that. There may be a hallucination that you should check out, or sentence claims or quotes, or numbers that surprise you. So basically, if something looks a little bit off, it's a good idea to verify it. And we also just want to talk a little bit about the AI summaries that I'm sure everyone has seen in their Google searching. This is Gemini. It's not Gemini for education. It's the general Gemini version, but it's also important to vet this summary as well, because while it does synthesize complex information, it also isn't always right, and it uses unverified information sometimes. It points to different parts of websites that may actually not be what it concludes, and it doesn't have a lot of nuance. So it's always important when it's showing you the links to actually go to the links and see what that information actually is. And we want to talk a little bit about ethics as well. So not only copyright, but ethical implications. Can AI be biased? Because it's a bunch of computers, but they're not neutral because they are trained on information, and the information is often biased. So they're learning from that biased data, and that can come into the tool that you're using and often amplify that. So you can get this from bias training data, from just information that is within historical discrimination, incomplete data, um, And there's a lack of transparency. So you're not always sure where this information is coming from. And this can result in a bunch of impact for healthcare. So disparities in how racial groups or genders get diagnosed, how they're treated, the recommendations that they get for treatment can be different for different patient demographics, for marginalized populations, and it can perpetuate existing inequities in where healthcare resources go. So it's always important, once again, to utilize your own critical thinking skills to verify the information that you're getting from the AI tool that you're using, and advocate for diverse data and ethical development to make sure that these biases, even though they're going to still exist, that they're mitigated. And there's also a lot of information on the environmental impact and health equity. So to create these tools, data centers are needed. They're large data centers, and they use a huge amount of electricity and fresh water, which raises bills, and it also limits the water supply. So these are things to keep in mind when you're using tools that are trained on these models. There's also an impact of data centers for people who live around the data centers on health outcomes. In terms of just sort of the use of them, they can lead to negative mental health outcomes, particularly for youth who are using these large language models a lot and are being impacted by them. As I mentioned before, there's a lack of transparency in how these large language models actually work. So you're not really sure who's using them, how they're being built, and that's not clear at this point. There's also an equity issue in terms of patient usage. So people who do have access to these models may be better informed than people who don't have access for a variety of reasons. And that can potentially lead to worse outcomes for them as well.
To Carrie's first point, actually, I always used to think, like, when using a large language model, I used to always, like, after I got my answer, I was like, thank you. And it didn't cross my mind until I was, like, in a talk to say, oh, wait, like, that also uses electricity and water and resources. So I don't have to thank the large language model for creating something. It sounds like a silly story, but in the end, right, it has direct implications. So I thought that that was uh, adds a little color to it. So let's just talk about briefly limitations and some areas of caution. And I think that that ties directly to one of the questions we just received in the chat. Technical limitations, so hallucinations. Hallucinations can best be defined as when the AI makes up something that's not really true. And it says it um, with a lot of like gusto. I was on a trip once and the tour guide was like, telling us things and one of my friends said, "Oh, I should do this. This is such a great job." And the tour guide said, "If you say it with a lot of conviction, no one's going to know if, you're wrong as to like the number of like toucan species that are out there." And so I always think of that when I think of AI hallucinations. Um, it's saying it with it wants to please you. It's saying it with a lot of authority, and it sounds right, especially if you don't know something, but it's untrue. This is especially true when the topics are more complex or niche, and there's less information out there, or there's more um, out there on the World Wide Web, or if there's more disagreement as to the information that's out there. So just think through those areas. And this is where sources are so important and asking it to check its sources. Using the full capacity of a model can also degrade responses, even for simple tasks. So if you overload it, kind of like if you have too many tabs open on your computer, at some point your computer is going to tell you no, thank you, and will slow down. Same idea with the AI model. So it has these capabilities for processing larger amounts of information, especially Gemini, but also note that you're using more of that capacity. This is kind of like a pie. Um, Data and knowledge gaps. So there are training date cutoffs, so you might not get the things that are most pertinent. Um, and the user must grant permissions for access to Google Workspace. So that might be a limitation or not. But if you're getting frustrated that something's not linking, you probably didn't give it access on the back end. So check your settings. And then integrations, note that they're confined to the Google ecosystem. So you can't use them in a Microsoft ecosystem. They don't talk to each other. There are a list of third-party resources, and when we send out the recording, we will also send out the links for these. You are welcome to screenshot some of these resources on ethics and health equity if that is helpful to you. Pausing for screenshot if needed. And we wanted to leave you with some thought and reflection questions for your own personal musings. What are some use cases you're considering for Google Gemini? What are some barriers to adapting this tool? And do you see different use cases for this tool than other generative AI tools? And we've presented some of that for you because we know that there's a lot out there. And the truth is, for some of these things, you can use any and all of them. And for others, you'll kind of find what works better for you. When I work on different things, I use a myriad of different tools, and I kind of like help them all like get married together at the end. So, just some ideas of things to think about post presentation. We do have an upcoming workshop, and we can post this in the link in the chat. But you found us here, so it's in the same place to register, integrating Google Gemini and Notebook LM into teaching practice. This one's geared more towards educators, so to teach you how to integrate these tools if it works for your practice or not. Some caveats to that. And with that, we thank you for your time and your attention, and we welcome to seeing you at a future course or reviewing this asynchronously. So with that, have a great day, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us right on schedule.